Welcome to the Glory of God in Mathematics. I'm Sarah Marinas, and we're here to talk about math. It's a subject that quickly evokes very strong emotions, dread, intense dislike, among others, and yet it's one of the most important. Join me as we attempt to search out the incredible things that God has hidden in this particular subject. In this episode, we're going to be addressing some of the big questions around math and how can we answer them. I'm going to start by just reading the questions themselves and not attempting to give any answer. As I read, think about how you would answer them. Think about what other answers you would hear. And then we'll jump right in. All right, from the top, here are the questions. Number 1, what is math? Have you ever thought about that? Without jumping to look it up in a dictionary, how would you explain that to someone who had never heard of the concept? Question number 2, where did math come from? Question number 3, what is the purpose of math? And my last two dovetail into that one. So with that in mind, what's the purpose of math? Why can we do it? And why is it universal, regardless of language, people group? Ponder these for a moment. Now I'm actually going to address them out of order, on purpose. So we're going to start with, if you followed along with me, question number 2. Where did math come from? And yes, we're going to take the easy way out. This is the easier question to address. As you look at the whole of history and you look at present reality, you basically come to 3 possible answers to this question. I'm going to briefly touch on each of them and then focus on the one that I believe is the right answer. Option number 1, math is the invention of man. We created it. It is a practical tool so that we can accomplish certain purposes, so that we can communicate with each other. And that is all that it is. Option number 2, math is God. You may have not heard of that before, but this is actually a very ancient idea. Historically, we can trace it back as far as the ancient Greeks. You may have heard of the Pythagorean theorem, but did you know the philosopher who came up with it, Pythagoras, actually worshipped math as God and started a school, a religious school, around that aim. His followers worshipped math. They believed that numbers were divine, some of the very early roots here of astrology, attributing special spiritual meaning to particular patterns and numbers and shapes. Now, there was good reason for some of those ideas. Pythagoras was identifying some very important universal truths, realities, rules, principles that were present in math, but he missed it. Because as I believe, reason number 3 is the answer. Math is not the invention of man. Math is not God. Math is the creation of God. And those things Pythagoras saw as he studied math and he studied the world, and he realized the universal rules and principles are the nature and character of God himself built into math. Naturally, how else could it be? And so if math is the creation of God, it emanates from his mind itself, then we have to now address the first question: what actually is this thing that we call math? Very difficult to define without actually using the word. So I want to take you just a tiny bit through the history of it, and then we'll bring it to present day and talk about it. So first of all, you may not have known the word math is an abbreviation for the Greek word mathematica. Now we have shortened that teensy bit today by taking off the A, oftentimes throwing on an S. Mathematics is what you get. But we didn't actually change the Greek word. It's an alliteration. So math or mathematics was the Greek word for knowledge. In Latin, the word for knowledge was science. Today, the word is knowledge. Exactly the same word. There is no change in meaning here. So in the ancient Greek day, where many of the philosophers saw these timeless truths and principles in the things that they called math, math was knowledge. In Pythagoras' case, math was God. Knowledge, math, God, synonymous. That's not quite true. Little piece of truth in there. But we see this idea from the very beginning that math is just a specific set of knowledge. Now today, we use a much more narrow view of math. We have many kinds of knowledge, we've categorized them, and we kind of keep them separate. So today, we are not referring to all knowledge and all education and all potential learning when we say math. The Greeks were. We don't. Today, when we use the word math, we're referring to something that's still actually quite nebulous to define. So I'm going to give you a couple of things, some truths about what math is, and then we'll circle back around to sort of a definition of it. So some things I want you to think about in light of the fact that math is something that comes from God. It is not the creation of man. The first is that math actually emanates from the mind of God itself. It isn't a physical thing that you can pick up and hold in your hands. It isn't alive, so it's not a being that has a will and personhood. It's a concept, an idea. And so this is something as a thought that comes from the mind of God. But it's more than just a thought. This thought shapes things. It has rules that order the things around it. It's the code, computer coding has made this a little bit more understandable to the modern generation. Think of computer coding for a minute. Math is a code with numbers and formulas by which God orders all of the physical creation. I know that's kind of big. We'll address it as we go forward and look at specific aspects of creation, specific aspects of math in future lessons. But that's what math really is. It's a completely natural outpouring of God's nature and character into the physical world. Now, when we look at math, there are several different categories even that we break that further down into. We consider quantity, that we can count things and know how much there are. We consider measurement, many different kinds of measurement, but we are able to put a number, assign a dimension to the amount of something that we have. We have length, volume, mass, many different ways that we can measure. So just give you some ideas to help you think, what are we talking about here? And then we have the idea of trying to represent on paper realities that are far more complex. This is the job of math. We model things with graphs, with formulas, with 3D CAD programs. All of this is an attempt to try and simplify and model what God has created. The complexity of creation, break it down to its bare bones skeletons, so that we have any hope of understanding bits and pieces of it and doing something with that. This is what math is. It's a lot bigger than what we usually think of when we look at what we've learned in school, what we practice in workbooks. And so if math comes from God, and math is actually this massive thing, this set of knowledge, mindset, and thoughts, an ordering of creation that comes from God, now we start to have a hope at rightly answering what its purpose is. The purpose of math is actually a really easy question to answer because it's the same purpose of all things. Math's purpose, why it exists, is to glorify God. Everything does. It either glorifies Him in its inability to be Him and therefore showing Him as superior, or it glorifies Him by pointing to Him and His nature and character and attributes. There isn't anything that exists that can't be used to glorify God, no matter how bent and broken. Thankfully, math is less on the bent and broken and more on the perfect side, which is why those in the ancient Greek world sought to worship instead of God. It's Romans 1 repeated all over again. They professed themselves to be wise, worshipped and served the creation rather than the Creator. Nothing's changed. You may be surprised to hear this, but even in the modern American university system, there are those today who worship math. Now, they usually don't come out and say those words, but when you listen to them speak and you hear the explanations that they give, and in some cases hear the way that they speak about it, you'll see very quickly that that is in fact what they see as God. They see it as being this universal truth, absolute, that works for all places, people, and things, and that it is above all and exists before we did and will exist after we die. It's still there and in fact growing in the university system. But today let's look at the last two questions before we conclude this very first episode. If math's purpose is to glorify God, and it is how God orders the physical creation, something that He uses, a way He thinks, why can we do it? And I'll even add an extra question to that. Why should we do it? If you don't know at all from the scriptures, in Genesis it describes the original creation of Adam and Eve and says that God made them in His image. And so this is not a, little kid view. Teach 3-year-olds in Sunday school, so we get this often. Oh, God looks like me. He has hands and fingers and toes, and that's what it means when God made me in His image. There is some pieces of truth to that. Christ incarnated and became man and took on flesh, and so yes, there is a little bit of that to this. But that's not all that it's really saying here. We are in God's image. The very character and nature of God is stamped on us. Now, sin has occurred, and we were never created to be equal with God. So we've never had the fullness of God in us. Only Christ does. But those pieces of God's character are and ought to be reflected in us. So if God uses math and understands math and sees it, then we can too. And not just we can, we actually should. And if you look through the scriptures, you see this. When God tells Noah to build the ark, does He leave it up to Noah how it's to be done? Does He let Noah do the measuring and the dimensions and decide on the size and shape and volume of the ark? He does not. He gives them incredibly precise directions, dimensions, how many stories, where to put the door, where to put the window, how long, how wide, how deep, everything laid out. When He gives Moses the instructions for building the tabernacle, same. Does He let Moses decide how to build it? Absolutely not. Everything down to the colors of the threads is ordered and detailed. Sizes, dimensions, volumes given for everything. Exactly the amount of mass of gold that's to be used in each object, specified and laid out. God uses math. God commands us to use math. And so this is a very important part of us glorifying God, is that we understand math, and as much as we are able to, and we use it. God uses math, we use math. These two things come together. And that last question, why is this a universal thing? This is something we'll explore much more in future episodes. But there is the reality that if God created it, and God's put His own stamp on it, His initials, if you will, the elements of His character, His nature, His attributes are written into math. Not that you can understand them apart from math. We need the scriptures. He reveals Himself in that way. But once you have them and you put the two together, you realize the beautiful harmony that is between them. And so we see that these truths are universal because God is the author of them. It's not something that's the invention of man. Had it been the invention of man, then with each new age, with each new society, each new rising empire, it would change. And yet it didn't. It doesn't. Addition works the same way, whether you're in ancient Babylon working with Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or when you're in the modern age working on nuclear physics. No change. Same goes for all of the other mathematical operations, measurements, ability to understand quantities, debts versus savings. All of these are universal truths. And the modern age doesn't like that. The age of reasoning in terms of, my truth and relativism and, well, according to this culture versus that culture, They don't like that. Math has been under attack in the last few years. You've probably heard the arguments 2 plus 2 isn't always 4. This is a direct attack on God, not just math. When you get God wrong, of course you're going to get everything that God created wrong as well. And so what we see happening in society today is just the natural next step in a society that is not just post-Christian, but has gone to the point of being decidedly antagonistic to Christians. They hate God. They hate everything he stands for, everything he created. They don't like absolutes. They don't like universal truths. And math is one of those bulwarks that smacks you in the face with the reality that there are universal truths. Whether you like it or not, 1 plus 1 is 2. You can't change that. You can't suddenly decide, I want the $10,000 in my bank account to be $20,000. It's $10,000 and that's what it is. The bills coming in have to match what the money is that's in there. It's not going to get paid, no matter how much you wish it to be otherwise. Maybe your truth in your head, but it's not reality and no one else is going to play along. And so we need to have a firm understanding of who God is and of how these mathematical principles work, these two things being completely related, as I'll show you in future episodes, so that we can rightly and wisely live in this world, so that we can glorify God with how we use our time and our resources, and so that we have easy evidence to immediately point others to God's glory as well. Join me next time as we explore this further.